So, yeah, it's an exciting time for Rust UI because there's this new blog post by Rafe Levine, yeah, detailing a new architecture he's devised, I guess, or so. Um, I think he's the original author of SciEditor, and then like derived or somehow starting from that, there's the Druids project, which is a GUI library for Rust, and yeah, also Pete, the rendering abstraction I'm using as well. Yeah, and so I guess he's not quite happy with Druid's current architecture, and so he's yeah, working on a new one, and that's what this blog post is talking about. And quite interestingly, this architecture looks somewhat similar to an architecture I arrived at like a while back, which I then sort of switched away from. Yeah, I think my first YouTube video actually shows that architecture in this repo. It's actually like the first commit because I was working on it in a different repo before. So right, yeah, I need to close all that. So basically, I don't know what the examples here. Right, so basically we have a simpler one. So basically in this one, there's elements and then there's widgets, which seems to be sort of like in this architecture. Oh, it's by the way, it's called Xilem, or I don't know how to pronounce that, but in this architecture, there's views. I have the docs here. There's views. There's the view trait, and then there's widgets. So it's like a two or I guess 3-layer architecture because there is also, oh, I guess it's not like an actual trait, but there is for no widgets. Views can also have, yeah, they have associated states. So there's view state and widget state. So in some sense, there's like 3 trees: view state tree, view tree, and widget tree. And view tree is only temporary and like gets diffed. Right. So this is somewhat similar to, like in my architecture, there wasn't any view tree. There is just like each element has an associated widget, and it can build the widget and it can also update the widget, which is sort of how this works, I guess. I think rebuild is kind of like update. Yeah, seems like it. Wait, what is element? Nah, that's widget. All right. So yeah, so it can both widget and internal state. So I guess that, like my idea was at that point to have it like in Elm where there's just global state, and widgets can have retained state, but like with Elm, because like the HTML structure can still have retained state, of course. But yeah, so like all application state should, or I guess view state you'd call it, would be contained to like a global thing. So here there's a run function, and basically it's generic over state. So you pass in an initial state and a build function, which given the state will return a widget. And then there's like a two element. There's this C parameter, which stands for context. Like that its debug is somewhat. I think my idea was to like build in debug tooling for that could print that or something, but never actually used that. So basically, yeah, this context, like here you have a copy, like an immutable copy, and then in the context of like this boolean, and in the context you actually get the one you can toggle. And interestingly, like this example is sort of similar. Now, not quite, because no, actually, yeah, we're passing in the context here as well. So lifetime wise, the return of this, so this lifetime wise doesn't depend on that like the lifetime of the bool reference, because for event handling it'll get its own reference, and like later, let me actually find find the commit where I started, or where I like, because now recently I've gone, yeah, you'll see, but I've gone in let's see. So I guess this was the state of my last video. Right, I don't know what. Right, so this is now using unstable Rust because I had to use some features to get this to work. But basically, what was I even trying to show? In this version, maybe let me show the widget trait. Right, like there's no more. Wait, actually, let's go back to this. Right, but anyway, like this is sort of similar to what I built. And yeah, I guess what I was trying to say is like, in like my basically before reading this blog post, my state was like there isn't any context anymore. So here you would pass in, let me actually, now this isn't optimal as an example, and this one isn't working. Yeah, this one is actually quite old. Right. But in this one, for callbacks, you would basically you would hold on to the reference, like in the widget, you would hold on to the reference to the state. So that means if two widgets want to update the same state, they can't exist at the same time. So that's why I started adding this flex item thing, which basically builds a new widget each time so that they don't have to exist at the same time. So in this example, it would show, maybe, let's see if we can run it. Mul to make it faster. Text box, it's called. By the way, the text box code is very much stolen from from Druid. So yeah, a while back I needed a text box, and I was copying like the code from Druid and adjusting it to like work with my widget abstraction. So basically, the thing is, these are storing state. So right, or sharing state. So this is what this thing is for. But of course, this is quite annoying and verbose, and yeah, like I don't like having to use macros. So when reading this blog post, like this thing here reminded me of my context abstraction, and like for some reason I was thinking that so basically, to explain, my new abstraction is basically trying to get rid of the different trees. So this is sort of a thing like with modern UI frameworks like Flutter or all of the web ones like React or Vue or Elm or so on. An issue there is like there's multiple trees of widgets. So like with the HTML or the web ones, there's the DOM, of course, which you can't really get around in web unless you render into a canvas. And then there's like the component tree on top of that. So basically, this blog post inspired me to like reintroduce like this generic bound, which allows me to, yeah, basically to pass an external state, but only like in all the methods, or in most of them. Yeah, so but it means the widgets can exist without actually referencing external state. And yeah, so this makes things much nicer. It also lets me get rid of the dependency on unstable Rust or nightly. Yeah, I think unstable is correct. And yeah, so like it lets me express it like this. So here the idea is like the first widget, the parameter is like a runtime type, which currently contains nothing, but yeah, the idea is like you would be able to, I guess, manipulate some basic stuff about maybe the window with it, but that's just a thought. But yeah, so now there's the row, and I've adapted this stateful widget thing, which basically injects some state. In this case, it's a U8, and lets me, yeah, use state from the context as well. So the text box, instead of having the content as internal state, you have to pass it in, so that, like in Vue or something, you get text as an event from a text box, or I guess there's just an input there, but yeah, you get it as an event, but that means like it needs to be copied each time, and I'm not a fan of that. So yeah, my idea is just to pass it in as a parameter, and then you can access its text in other widgets or like for other stuff. So it doesn't need to be copied unnecessarily. But basically my solution for that is a function which, given the environment, returns text box content. So that solves, like, I was thinking we need to be able to have references to external state in widgets because of stuff like that, because I want to be able to mutate external state. But yeah, now I got this idea that actually I can have it be a function, reference the external state like from the environment with like, yeah, with this, with the callback basically. So yeah, currently stateful widgets like just injects new state as context and also as a parameter here. So you, like, from a stateful widget can't then also reference external state, but I'll obviously have to change that. So maybe the context, instead of like just a U8 here, it'll be a struct where you can reference this new state, which is internal state, and also external state via another field in the struct or something like that. And maybe it could implement deref for and deref mute for the internal state or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, basically that's the idea. And now it looks way nicer. So yeah, maybe let's run that. So yeah, pop up. Currently it's just like doesn't actually work quite properly yet. And it still has a bug I need to figure out. Yeah, something's wrong, like that shouldn't happen. This is a like thing that can happen because of this. Basically, like, build an update if there's something, like if the state is an enum or even the self as well as an enum. Like, this abstraction itself doesn't guarantee like that they're in sync, like after, like, for like calling this function. Like, the idea would be like if you've updated it, then they must be in sync, but isn't guaranteed by the type system. So I'm not a fan of that. I still want to change that. The idea is to maybe have a function that, or have these like return a thing that is combined state and like combined state and self, or and widget, and then have a way method on that to like extract just the state for storing. But yeah, I'll still have to figure that out. But I'm thinking that's sort of basically what happens here. Like I said, these, like, if it's, yeah, if it was implemented properly, obviously that wouldn't happen. But at some point I want to actually get to the point where I can make sure that doesn't happen with the type system. So yeah, let's open this again. So yeah, basically the U8 acts sort of as a radio button here. And this is just a separate checkbox with its own stateful widget. And then there's two text boxes that share the same state. So if I type in here, they both have the same content. Yeah, so basically that's my new abstraction with this generic parameter all widgets have. So yeah, obviously what's still missing here is an equivalent to what they're calling adapt here, which in my old implementation, this is it. Right, it was called Contextualize. So it basically took one context and made it into another. Yeah, so that's still missing. Right, and obviously as well, like in this blog post, he outlines, I don't know what the actual status of this is, but like a reactivity system. I quite like using arcs for basically building immutable data structures. But yeah, I don't have anything in that direction. My thing as well in my thing currently. So currently it always like updates and then renders or handles input. So like it always does all of the work in each frame. Although a frame is just when stuff happens, but obviously if possible it should be possible. I'll figure out some like way to do incremental I don't know, rebuilds or something, maybe even incremental renders. Although I think with modern GPUs that's not as important anymore, but yeah, like if it makes sense, yeah, like if it's not too complicated, then it doesn't add much complication for the programmer or like for the user of the library, then I'll add that as well. Which, yeah, by the way, in this, this is quite well done, I think. So basically there's pre-layout and then there's layout. And in layout, it passes in a proposed size and returns an actual size. So for reference in Flutter, layout basically gets a constraint and returns a size. What that means is if you have a flex list of widgets beside each other, it isn't possible to have them all expand. Like if it's a horizontal flex list, for example, expand to the same height unless that's predetermined and not based on like the height of the content. That's like my main issue with it, and I think this solves that by having pre-layout and then actual layout. What I did is a bit more primitive, I guess. Mine is more just, let's actually look at the docs. Mine is more like it returns, so it actually you have to get the min size from a separate method, but we could just as well return it from build and update. So I might actually do that at some point because this proving somewhat annoying for containers. But yeah, so this returns a size, but that's actually the min size. So based on the constraint, the widget decides which size it has to be minimally, or at which size, yeah, what's the minimum size it needs. And then in render, it gets the actual size. Now, this is obviously not an issue at all if you render all the widgets all the time and like don't retain anything. But if we'd like to do that, then that becomes an issue. And this solves that quite elegantly because this actually, yeah, like this will be called to like then set the size, and then the widget knows its own size. And this is basically just, I guess you could call this measure as well. But yeah, so yeah, that's quite nice. And the line might be important as well. So currently I have none of that. So alignment would have to be done manually. But yeah, I think a point might come where I need to implement that as well. So the event handling stuff in here is also quite interesting. So basically there's this system in where each widget or I guess view has an ID, but for event handling, you store the whole path of like IDs. So now I think in my library this is a bit different, or will be a bit different, since yeah, like the widgets directly get keyboard events and so on, and cursor events, and so like they can call their callbacks and so on directly. So there's actually, for basic operation, there's not even need for an ID. There might be for performance optimizations at some point, I'm not sure, but certainly there will be for good performance, like if we introduce stuff like cursor blinking, because then we need timers, which will be external. And yeah, so like there needs to be like when the timer is done, needs to be a way to like notify the widget of that again. And yeah, I've thought about that quite a bit, and yeah, like I've sort of shied away from using something like a path of IDs because it's a list with variable length, so you'll need to allocate it. But I think that's actually not too bad as long as like you don't need to allocate it whenever recreating the view. Like this is something that's really important to me in my thing. So by the way, there is sort of two trees in my library as well. There's state and then there's widget. So I guess that's why there's three here, and in mine it's just two. But yeah, like as long as you can keep the ID paths in, I guess in the state would be for mine. That should be fine. It would become an issue if like you had to recompute those whenever like rebuilding a part of the tree, because then like yeah, for me like it's quite important to avoid unnecessary allocations. So I basically want to be in a situation where allocations only happen for stuff that stays in the state permanently. or for not for temporary like rebuilds of the of like widget subtrees or something. Yeah. Right, and then like there's this change propagation part, which talks about different options. Yeah, like this arc thing for which could be really nice. Yeah, so yeah, that's certainly there's this comment here like hidden inside every UI framework is some kind of incrementalization framework. So Ron Minsky, I don't know who that is, but someone said. So maybe we'll need something like that. Currently, there's not, because we just re-render everything, but I think there will probably come a need for that if you want to write performant apps. Yeah. Async, I think would be quite interesting to integrate in my thing as well. Yeah, I have had some thoughts about it, but yeah, I'll have to think about it again. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that was today's video. Yeah. See ya.